Alright, how's everybody doing today? My name is Ammon King. I am re-recording my Angular Putting It All Together workshop due to technical difficulties earlier. I had to cancel my live workshop and fix my computer, and then here I am back. Hopefully this should go a whole lot smoother this time. So what are we going to do today? Today our goal is to make a CRUD Angular project, kind of using all of the pieces that we've learned to deal with in Angular so far. It'll be pretty fun. We're going to manage a list of pets. So let's get started. I'm going to make a new Angular project. I'm going to say ng new pet-store. I'm going to use the command skip tests. So this will create a new Angular project. Do I want Angular routing? Yes. Do I want to use CSS? Yes. Right. Cool. This will take a minute to install all of the pieces. I'm going to go ahead and pause this recording real quick just so we don't wait 3 minutes to install everything. I'll be right back. Alright, so we're back. I have installed my Angular application. It has gone through and installed all of its node modules dependencies. And I want to go ahead and make sure I cd into this project. So I'm going to cd pet store. Make sure that I'm inside my project. That's where I want to be when I'm running this. Alright, so inside of here, one of the first things I want to do is I want to make a JSON file that's going to kind of hold my mock database. I'm going to call this petdata.json. Right? I want to make sure that is actually in my pet store folder, not outside of it. Inside, or right there, smack dab in the middle. This pet data is going to hold an object. It's going to have an object with a property called pets. Pets is my collection of pets. It's going to be an array. It's going to be an array of objects. I'm going to pre-fill a pet in here with an ID property of 1. A name of truffle. And a type, dwarf hamster. Truffle is a dwarf hamster. Cool. I'm going to use the JSON server npm package, JSON server, --watch, and the name of the file, petdata.json. This will spin up and tell me it's available at this address, localhost :3000. Loads up a page that will look surprisingly like this. Here's my pet. Cool. Truffle the dwarf hamster, ID number 1. Alright, that is ready to go so far. I'm going to open up a new terminal window because I want to keep that server running. My new terminal window, I'm going to start up my Angular application. I need to make sure that I'm still in my pet store folder. And then I can run ng serve --open. This will open up my Angular project. It'll take it a second because it will build it, and then it will open. And we'll wait for this one because it should be pretty brief. Alright, that has popped up. I'm going to actually try to give some screen real estate here and pop this up on the screen. Actually, I want to just take that tab. Alright, let's see if it'll let me drag this over a little bit so I can have my code and my browser page running at the same time. Alright, there's my pet store. I'm going to zoom out. Reset, zoom. Cool. There's my default Angular page. That is up and running. Now I'm ready to start building my application. I'm going to open up a third terminal window. Again, I want to make sure I'm in my pet store folder. In my pet store folder, I can start adding pieces to my Angular application. First piece I want to add is I want to describe my data. So I'm going to make a class. So I can say ng generate class. I'm going to call this class pet. I'm going to make a pet class. It'll make me a file right here, pet.ts. I'm going to match up the data structure I'm using in my database. So I'm going to say ID, which is a number, name, which is a string, and type, which is also a string. I can save this guy. Groovy. So this is my type of data. This is the object that I'm working with inside of my application. It's a little bit bigger. There we go. Cool. Step number 2, I'm going to make a service. ng generate service pet data. I'm going to make a pet data service. It's going to reach into this JSON server and get my data back out. Pet data service. Right? Now I'm going to be making HTTP requests. So I actually need to add something into app module TS. I need to import HTTP client module from @angular/common/HTTP. This is a module, so it's going to go with this module friends. This is an array, so I'm going to put a comma, and then HTTP client module. And I can save that. I'm going to go back to my pet data service, and I'm going to import HTTP client. I'm also going to import HTTP headers from @angular common HTTP. Inside the constructor, I'm going to inject this HTTP client. I can do that just like I would inject a service into a component. I'm going to say private HTTP is a type of HTTP client. I'm not going to be using HTTP headers directly. The HTTP client itself is going to use it, but it does need to be added. Alright. I need to capture a URL. I need to know, which is a type of string, I need to know where my JSON server is. If I recall, the address for my JSON server is http://localhost:3000/pets. Right? That's going to be where my pet endpoint is going to live. Cool. I can now make a method called getPets. I can get my array of pets out of this system. I'm going to use the RxJS observable library to make my method a type of observable pet. It's going to return this.http.get a pet array from my URL. This.url. I need to import a couple things here. I need to import pet so it knows what a pet is. I also need to import observable from RxJS. Just like my HTTP headers, I'm going to import something here called of at the same time. Pet array. There we go. I will not be using of directly, but the observable library does need it in order to function. So I'm getting an array of pets out of my database. Right? The first thing I'm going to want to do is display this list of pets on the screen instead of this default page. So I need to generate a component. I'm going to see ng generate component pet-list. I'm going to use the word pet dash in all of my components so that I kind of have them organized. Pet list. I want to see this on my page. My main app component HTML shows what the default HTML on my page is. If instead I say app-pet-list and save this, it should change the text pet list works. That's my component loading. So I'm going to go into my pet list, and I'm going to give this the ability to read from my data service. So I need to inject into the constructor a private pet data service, which is a type of pet data service. And I need to import that. I'm going to call one lowercase p and one capital P. The lowercase one is my variable. This component is going to hold on to a list of pets, which is going to be a pet array. I also need to import pet here so that my component knows what that object looks like. Inside of the constructor, inside the ng on init, I'm going to call a method called this.getPets, which does not exist yet. So I need to make it. Make getPets is a function. It's a void function because it doesn't return anything. This is going to say this.petData service.getPets.subscribe. When we're using the RxJS observables, we need to subscribe to them. Subscribe takes an arrow function. I'm going to use P as shorthand for pets. So P is going to be my parameter, and the code that I want to run is this.pets equals P. No semicolon. It's going to truncate this to one line, but that code is still there. So if I go into my pet list component HTML, I'm going to gut the HTML in there. I'm going to give a little header, pet list. I'm going to make an unordered list filled with list items. My list items, I can use the ng-for directive to pull off single items from pet of pets. Pull off single items out of my array. I'm going to go doop, double curly brackets, pet dot name. That's not loading. Do I have any errors? Inspect console. I do have errors. Is not a function at petlist component dot push. Pets is not a function. Pet data service get pets is not a function. There we go. Looks like it just took a save to get that to kick in. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Cool. Pet list. There's my pet truffle. All right. So I have a pet list. This will display my pets. I want to be able to add a pet. I'm going to ng generate component pet add. Right? Cool. I can close out the pages I have so far, and then I can focus on my pet add. My pet add form. So I'm going to load pet add component HTML. I'm going to put a header at the top, pet add, so I know what page I'm on. I'm going to have some basic fields in here. I'm going to have a name field, which is an input, a line break, a type field, which is also an input, another line break, and then a button, which is going to say add. I'm not able to see this on my page yet. I don't have any routing. So conveniently, Angular made a router for me, so I'm going to go in here and configure my routes. My routes is going to be several objects in this routes array. I'm going to start off with a default route. This has redirect to. This is going to land on whatever route I want my default page to load as. This is going to be my list. Path match full. My next route is my list route. Path list component pet list component, which I need to import. I'm also going to add my add route. Path add component pet add component, which I need to import. Now my routing should work. If I go to /list and add, add isn't doing anything. That's because in my main app component, I'm only telling it to list out the pet list. I can change this to be my router outlet, and my router now knows where to put content. This is now my form. If I go back to /list, I get my list. I should probably make some navigation. I'm going to make that with a component. I'm going to say ng generate component nav. I'm going to make a nav component. I'm going to stick that right above my router outlet. app-nav. Nav works. I can go in my nav component and empty it. I'm going to use a nav HTML make an anchor tag with a router link equal to list, the link that says list. Make another anchor tag with a router link to add that says add. If I save this, my link should work, but they're jammed right next to each other. I don't like that. I can go into my nav component CSS, target my anchor tag, give them a margin right of 5 pixels. This will separate my navigation links. Now we can finish working with our add component. So I have the HTML for this. What I need to do is I need to be able to create a new pet inside of my pet add component. So I'm going to make a property called new pet, which is the type of pet equals a new pet. I'm going to create a new pet object. This has been automatically imported for me. The constructor needs to know how to talk to the data service. So I'm going to make private pet data service. It's a type of pet data service. And I need to import that as well. Pet data service. I'm going to make a method called add pet. This doesn't do anything quite yet. I need to do a little bit more work. Right. I'm going to be turning on Angular's two-way data binding. So I'm going to go into my app module TS. Typically I'll put this on line 3 so I know it's there. I need to import forms module from @angular/forms. It's a module, so it needs to import with its module friends. So I add it into this imports array, forms module. Awesome. My page is up and running. I want to bind my fields to this new pet option. In my inputs for this form, I'm going to use what Angular calls a banana in a box. A set of parentheses inside a set of square brackets. I use the ngModel directive. I say ngModel equals new pet.name. I'm going to do the same thing for the type. I'm going to bind it using ngModel to be equal to new pet.type. My button is going to bind to the click event, and it's going to call a method called addPet. I can save my code and make sure everything's working so far. I don't have any error messages. So now my button's going to call my addPet method, but my data service doesn't have a way to add a pet yet. So I'm going to go back into my pet data service, and I'm going to give it the ability to add a pet. It's going to take a parameter called pet, which is a type of pet. That's going to give me back an observable pet with a single item. This is going to return this.http.post. I'm going to make a post request. I'm going to send a type of pet to it using this.url and a second parameter, which is my pet parameter I've passed in. This may look a little bit complicated, but I'm just passing down my pet object and sending it to my JSON server. And it's going to return the result of that. That should be my new pet that I've added to my database. Awesome. So I go back to my pet add component TS, and now I can wire this up. I can say pet data service, this.pet data service, .add pet, using this.new pet. I need to subscribe to this. In the subscription, I'm going to get a result, which I'm going to call P. Right? P is going to say, all right, I've added the pet, so then what do I need to do? Right? After I add a pet on here, I want to go back to my list page. I'm going to add a second injection into my constructor. I'm going to bring in a private router, which is a type of router. I can import that as well. That imports from Angular/router. I'm going to manually tell my router to navigate. I want to navigate to my list page. This router is going to take an array of objects, but I want to tell it just to go to the list. This is the manual way to tell Angular to navigate. So from list, I should see truffle. If I go to add, hypothetically, this should work. Nugget is also a dwarf hamster. I press add. Wow, I see truffle and nugget right there. Magically, as soon as my list component loaded, it fetched that list of animals and pets for me. I can add Pepper, which is a chinchilla. Bam, Pepper's in my list of pets now. I want to see all my data in my pet list though. So for now, I'm going to close up my pet add and my nav and go back to my pet list. Instead of just the pet name, I want to say is a pet.type. I want to know what type of pets I have. Truffle is a dwarf hamster, and a chinchilla. There's a lot more information about my pets. So now I can add pets, and I can list my pets. That's pretty cool. So what I want to do now is delete pets. I can actually accomplish this with most of the things that I have already. Inside of my pet list component HTML, and inside of my list item, I'm going to break down a line so I can add some code inside of here. I'm going to make a button. This button is just going to have an X. There's going to be an X button next to all of my pets. Right? Let me make this a little bit bigger. That should show those buttons a little bit nicer. Cool. There's that X. Right? Button. This is going to say click. I'm binding to the click function, or the click event, equals delete pet.id. That's going to run a delete pet method every time I click on these, using the ID of that pet. Awesome. I would load up my pet data service and give this the ability to delete a pet. So I can say delete pet. I'm going to take an ID, which is a number. Right? ID, which is a number. This is going to give me back an observable of type pet. Kind of like my add pet. It's going to return this .http.delete. I'm going to delete a type of pet using this .url plus a slash plus the ID. The address to delete the pet is sending a delete request to my address with the ID of the pet added to that address. Alright, I can go back to my pet list component TS file. I have the button, I have the data service, now I need to connect those. So connect them, I'm going to say delete pet is a void method that doesn't return anything. This is going to call this .pet data service .delete pet with an ID. I'm going to get an ID in here, ID which is a number. I'm going to pass that ID parameter in. I need to subscribe to this, just like my other methods. Inside the subscription, I get a parameter equal to, and what do I want to do with this when I delete something? Every time I delete something, I want to call my this.getPets. That method is already built and Taylor built to get my array of pets out. So hypothetically, if I click on this button to delete Pepper as a chinchilla, that thing should refresh. My list refreshed. It removed it. It removed it and re-pulled that data. I made the request to remove. Then it said, okay, something's been removed, so get my array back. And there's my data. That item was removed. Pretty simple and straightforward. Awesome. So I want to edit, right? I can get pets, I can add pets, and I can delete pets. I want to edit a pet. To accomplish that, I need probably the more complex of the actions. I need to add two methods into my service. I want to be able to get a pet by an ID, which is a number. This is going to give me back an observable pet as a data type. What this is going to do is it's going to return this.http.get, get a single pet from our URL plus a slash plus the ID. Right. Sending a GET request to the address with an ID at the end is going to give me a single item back instead of the whole array of items back. So this should fetch a single item from our database and give it back to my page. But to get a single item, I need some navigation for that. So I'm going to make a new component, ng generate component pet edit. I'm going to make a pet edit component. And I'm going to make a route to that component. So inside my router, I'm going to add my last route, path edit. My edit is going to take an ID parameter. It's going to call the component pet edit component, which I need to import. And I can save that. The navigation to that is going to be handled by these list items. So I can do that by going into my pet list and my pet list component HTML. I'm going to add another button. I'm going to add a router link equals. In order to pass this a parameter, I need to make some changes. I can do some Angular binding here by saying this router link is equal to an array with the appropriate marks around it. Inside this array, I'm going to say go to the edit component with single quotes and use the pet ID. If I just put the word edit in here, I should see this in action. If I hover this over this edit, I see localhost 4200 edit 1, localhost 4200 edit 2. That works pretty good. But I don't want a link, I want a button, because my delete is a button as well. So I can make a button in here that just says edit. So I have a delete and I have an edit button. Cool. This edit should navigate. Pet edit works and my address is accurate. So I can go into my pet edit component and I need to give this several capabilities. This is going to be my more complex component because this is doing kind of the actions of what would be an edit, or what would be a create, and what would be a delete almost at the same time. Right. So this component is going to need three things injected in the constructor. I need my data service. I'm going to say private pet data service is a type of pet data service. I need to import my router, so I'm going to navigate after I edit. So I'm going to say private router is a type of router. I need to import router. In order to read the parameter, I need a private route, which is a type of activated route. I can import that as well. Activated route allows me to read off of the parameters of the address. Just like my add, I need to have an edit pet, which is a type of pet, equal to a new pet. I'm initializing this one as a new pet because the page will load almost instantaneously. Since the page will load almost instantaneously, I need to have some kind of default empty data there to start out with. Inside my ng on init, so when my component loads up, I want to say this dot route dot params dot subscribe. I can subscribe to the route parameters. As soon as there's a parameter in the route, I want to take it. Say param. What do I want to do with this? Right? I want to use that parameter, reach into the data service, and get that pet back out. So I'm going to say this dot pet data service dot get pet. I'm going to say plus param ID. Plus param ID is going to make sure that's a number. It's going to try to perform math on it. So I'm going to get the pet. I'm going to subscribe to its method. It's going to give me a result back. I'm going to call that P. And set this edit pet equal to P. I can have a chain of subscriptions here. As soon as it gets a route parameter, I'm requesting my pet data. As soon as I get that, I'm pushing that inside of my local edit pet. I can validate this works by basically stealing the HTML from my ad page. I'm going to steal that and tweak it slightly. So I take the content from pet add and put it in pet edit. I change my models from new pet to edit pet. I'm going to change my button from saying add to save. So if I go to my list and I press edit on either of my pets, that specific pet information should load up onto my form. That means that it is grabbing that correct item and loading it up for me. I'm going to change my title to pet edit as well, so I know what page I'm on. Edit, pet edit. So what I want to have happen as soon as I type a name in here and save it, I want that to go and post and save that item for me. So what I need to do is I need to go into my pet edit component TS, and I called that method save pet. I'm going to make a method called save pet. This doesn't have anything to call yet. So I'm going to go into my pet data service. Right? This has no method to edit my pet yet. I'm going to say edit pet and take a type of pet object. This is going to be an observable pet, just like my other ones. I'm going to return this.http.put. I'm going to put a type of pet at my URL plus a slash plus pet.id and then my pet object. So this one's a combination kind of get a single one or delete. It's kind of a combination of all my other methods. I need to send a parameter through the URL so it knows which pet to edit, and I need to send it the new data as a put request. So going back to my pet edit TypeScript page, I can finish wrapping this up. I'm going to say this dot pet data service dot edit pet. I'm going to edit this dot edit pet. I want to subscribe to this. Subscribe. Just like my add pet, I want this to navigate back to my list. I'm going to say P, because that's the parameter I'm going to get back. This dot router dot navigate. Navigate is going to take an array of the places I want to go. I want to go to list. So what this means is if I change truffle's name to truffle2 and save it, I get my truffle2 back. I can refresh my page and validate that data is coming from my database. If I edit and change it back to truffle, cool. I'm going to add a pet. Pretzel. No. Lumpy was a cat. Lumpy the cat. Lumpy is a cat. Now I'm going to edit Lumpy and say Lumpy is a weird cat. I'm going to save that. Lumpy is a weird cat. I can delete it, and it's gone. So I have my create function through my add page. I have my edit function through my edit button. I have my delete function through my little delete button here. And I have my get functions by just seeing my list of data. So I can have a full-fledged application here, doing all of the methods that I need. This required several pieces of my application. I need a database, so I'm using my JSON file kind of as my mock database. I need a model, which is going to be my pet class that describes my ID, my name, and my type. I need a service. This service is responsible for talking to my backend JSON server. This knows the address of that collection, and it has many methods. These methods are pretty common for this type of data access. I can get all of my pets. I can get a single pet by its ID. I can add a pet. I can delete a pet, and I can edit a pet. These are using the appropriate HTTP verbs. A GET request gets all of my pets. A GET request with a specific ID gets that pet by the ID. A POST request with a JSON object to the address creates that pet. A delete request to my address with an ID deletes that pet by the ID. A put request to my address plus the ID with the new object updates the object of that ID with my new information. I'm using my router to navigate between my components. I need to know what address matches which component. My list goes to my pet list component, my add goes to my pet add component, and my edit with a parameter goes to my pet edit component. My app module needed to have several things added to it. In order to use HTTP request, I needed to add HTTP client module. In order to use Angular's two-way data binding, I needed to add forms module. Both of those add into the imports array. I've added 4 components. I have a basic nav component that just has HTML. This has the links to both of my components that I can manually navigate to, my list and my add. I use some basic CSS to put some spacing between those 2 links, a 5-pixel margin. My pet list component calls my service that's injected through the constructor, and then on the ng on init, I tell it to get my list of pets by calling the getPets method of my data service and subscribing to it. I take the result and I put it in my local pet array. The HTML for this component uses the ng-for directive to loop through these pets, displaying their name and the type. I also have a delete button and an edit button. The edit routes to the edit page, and the delete button just calls a method with the ID. I have both of these methods inside of my pet list component. I have a method to get the pets. I have a method to delete a pet by the ID. After I delete a pet, I call the method to get my pets back out to refresh my data. That makes sure my local list is synchronized with what has happened to the database. If for some reason that item didn't get deleted, I could know something visually didn't happen correctly, because it would not go away from the list. My pet add page uses the ng model directive, which is two-way data binding, to bind to a new object with a name field and a type field. I use the click event binding to bind to the add pet event of my component. My pet add component initializes a new pet. It pulls in the constructor, and it pulls in a router. After I add the pet, by calling my data service and subscribing to the add pet event, I tell Angular to navigate back to the list. Once I click on Pet Edit, or the Edit button, it loads up my Pet Edit page. That is remarkably similar to my Add page, but using a different object. I'm using Edit Pet instead of Add Pet. I'm using the same data binding though. My Pet Edit component has the most complexity. I need to call my service, I need to call my router, and I need to use the activated route to get information out of the route that's been hit. Once my component loads, I subscribe to the route parameters and get information from them. I use that information to pass down to my data service to get a pet by the ID from the address. Once I get that by subscribing to it, I take that returned pet and I put it into my local edit pet property. I do the same thing as adding by passing that pet down to my data service. I then subscribe to the result and navigate back to the list page when successful. So this has been kind of a medium complexity for a project. We have lots of moving parts going on. If we build this in the kind of same order, we start off with our data, some simple methods to get our data out. We can add an item to a list, we can delete an item from a list, and then we can update an item to a list. We start off with the easiest level of complexity and build up to more complex operations. And this is our application. We have full control over this pet data now. If I had something in there I didn't want, I can remove it. If I missed something, I can add it. Ammon is a type of bean. Right? If I misspelled something, I can edit them. And say Ammon is a type of beans. If I didn't need that one anymore, I can remove it. And I have access to my data. These are the basic 4 CRUD operations in an Angular application using HTTP and a router and a service. All right, I hope everybody enjoyed this. I hope people enjoy watching this. Feel free to try to make this project as well. I'm going to post this up on GitHub. I'll actually do that right now so that we can see where the address that's going to go to, because this is a fun process as well. I'm going to close all of my terminals to do this. Open up a new terminal window and I'll make sure I'm in my pet store. I'm going to load up GitHub and go to my GitHub page. I'm going to post that there. I'm going to make a new repository called Pet Store. This gives me an address. I'm going to use the address it gives me to link my local repository to my remote repository. I can do that with a couple commands. Angular by default initializes a Git repository with the project. I can tell that because the source control icon is lit up, and at the bottom left it shows I'm on the master branch. So the first thing I want to do is check in all of my code to my local repository. Say git add dot. My 18 will flash slightly on the left here. Then I want to say git commit -m. Say workshop code. I'm going to give this a message. This is my commit message. My 18 goes away. This tells me that I've committed my code to my local repository. I want to link this to my remote repository now, the repository I made on GitHub. I'm going to say git remote add origin and paste in my address. Cool. I now have a little cloud button at the bottom. I can push this up by saying git push -u origin master. This will process, tell me it was resolved. Awesome. My cloud changes to a synchronize icon. If I go to my GitHub page and refresh it, I should see my code right here. I'll copy this address and put it on a notepad real quick and show it a little bit larger on the screen so we can see it. That address is github.com/ammonk/petstore. That's all the code I've used to work on this project. Feel free to pull it down, take it apart, follow along, see how it works. All right. I hope everybody has a good day.